Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Good morning, Uganda. Indeed, welcome back from the weekend. It's a fresh new week. It's a Monday, 23rd of January, 2023. Well, I'm pretty sure there is a category of Ugandans right now that are in too much excitement. And I know what I'm talking about because I have seen it with my two bare eyes just a couple of minutes ago. Those must be the Arsenal fans wherever they are. I can tell you the smiles, the glee that is written all over their faces. Sadly, I think in this entire building, I could be the only one who was rooting for Man U. But right now, if you meet an Arsenal fan, if you meet an Arsenal supporter, I don't know what you can say to them because they are literally walking on air. Well, it's Good Morning Uganda. We'll be getting into all of that. My name is Philomena Mastiko. But aside from soccer, there is quite a lot that is happening. Drugs being impounded by the National Drug Authority, being sold off in unlicensed pharmacies or by unlicensed people. That's very, very sad. But first things first, good morning, Felix. How are you doing? Why are you pretending like you're not happy? Yet yesterday you were on a different level altogether. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Philo?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. It's a lovely Monday, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I just wonder how some people did sleep. I have lots of friends who do support Manchester.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's sort of like, it's one of those games people wait for, like they're waiting for a wedding. In Uganda they say, "Vinanga mbaga waka." So clearly, and out of that game, whoever does it is gonna have the loudest of sounds for the entire time. But yesterday's, unfortunately, on Saturday we had a burial. One of my friends lost a granny who he was so close to. So we were in Kenyena for burial. But then yesterday was the day that the Lord made.
I knew it.
Clearly, we shall be glad and
you know, wherever I was,
it.
there was too much noise in my neighborhood. But the back of my mind, I was like, I know my man Felix right now. Wherever
honestly,
he is.
there was what you call necessary noise.
Yes.
That noise was necessary for the fans, for the Man U fans to just calm down. Honestly, these guys, I think Arsenal has really, I don't know what Kweyubura is in English. Robert will help me.
Robert will tell us over here.
Yeah, but they have become anew of themselves, and they gave us a very, very good game, trust me.
Well, it was such a good game that Robert came talking about it the entire morning. I hardly hear this gentleman talking about soccer, but this morning it was the topic. Good morning, Robert. Welcome back from the weekend.
Oh, wow. What a weekend, I must say.
Indeed, I can see.
What a weekend. I must tell you, soccer is something that really takes everybody. And had we been defeated?
I can assure you wouldn't be standing here.
Well, I put some tweets on Twitter.
Yes.
And I even saw, you know, the Archbishop of the church, the Archbishop of the Anglican Church, the right most Reverend Dr. Stephen Kazimba Mugalu is a supporter of Arsenal. So I had seen people were saying if they lose, if they do this, and then Omumbeja Katarina Sangali Ambogo is a Man U fan.
Yes.
Seven two so kusasira kwa Jolly Omumbeja. But of course, to the Arsenal fans, I must say, we are back. We are back. The glory of Arsenal, you know, Americans have a saying, make America great again. Now, we are making Arsenal great again. It is proving that it is that team that many used to talk about in the days of Patrick Vieira, Thierry Henry, and so the glory, it is rebuilding its glory. And this was visible yesterday.
Well, there you go. Mollen, welcome back from the weekend. Good morning. I do understand there were also some special celebrations over there. How are you feeling this Monday?
Well, I am all right.
Are you though?
I'm feeling fine, but I feel like Arsenal guys are overhyping everything. Like, you guys have been on top of the table. Like, okay, so what is
Not
new
when you
now?
defeat Manchester United.
Yes, but where is
Actually,
Manchester United on the table? So I think it's a normal win. I don't know what the hype is all about.
What team
you
do you
guys can
support?
I was
talk
about to
about
ask that,
something
yes.
else.
Before you can even say
I don't
anything.
support Arsenal. That is
No,
a fact.
it's
And I
about
think
what
if
team do you support?
You
If
know
you don't
what?
mind
Do we
saying.
have something else that we can talk about apart from sports and what
May
else is
the Lord
happening in the
comfort
country?
you and strengthen you in this
A lot of things were happening in this country
over.
over the weekend, and one good thing is that, by the way, a lot of churches are starting on with the fasting.
Yes.
They're going on with, you know, the introduction to that. And this year, I think there is a lot that we need to fast for as Uganda. I mean, we have seen corruption cases to the saga at the airport. A lot of things are getting uncovered in this country, and I think we need God's grace. So I'll be going along with that.
The fasting, that is going to be the theme for your fast this year.
Yes.
Well, I totally understand if you're doing it on behalf of the country. I'll be very happy about it. Speaking of fasting, well, there was a story that was also making rounds over the weekend. How a lady in Lira actually injected her own son with the blood that is HIV positive, and she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. She intentionally did it. Now, when she was asked the reason, this is why I say we need to pray for the country. She said she was simply very mad and angry with her husband. So she decided to take it out on the innocent boy. So tell me why we wouldn't have to pray and fast for this country, Robert.
More so when this very week on Thursday we are going to be celebrating 37 years of the NRA liberation struggle, because it was on the 26th of January 1986. I know Felix can narrate that very well. When actually we saw President Museveni and others take over Kampala and of course leadership. Then on the 29th he was sworn in, and he made a promise to Ugandans that they shouldn't take that as a mere change of guards, but a fundamental change in the politics of Uganda. And I must say, we've come very far.
And in your own opinion, how do you assess those statements today?
Well, it's a 50-50.
Really?
Yeah, 50-50, because
After
when you look at
7 years and so.
yeah, because when you look at, we must say, peace and tranquility that we have achieved, which if you look at the 10-point program, by then, of course, they made some adjustments and added in a number of things. You'll find that if I want to look at those pillars as they were and where we've gotten, I think, yes, I don't want to be an extremist to say it is 100%, but let me say it's a 50-50. Though, also over the weekend, I don't know if you noticed what was in Sebei region. The MK project.
Yes.
What? People turned up in huge numbers. I was like, what is happening?
What was happening there, Robert? You could update us.
He needs to give us the
No, we just need to know, because some of us were not privy to that.
Okay, that is General Muhoozi Kainerugaba was in that region trying to associate and of course launch a few activities there, and it was a huge turn-up. Many people came up to that function and graced that ceremony.
Well, there you go. Quite a whole lot of things happened over the weekend, but then there was also a report I was looking through, and I did not know as a planet or as a world, we waste a lot of money every single year. About 1.3 trillion worth of wasted food is what happens all over the country. We are wasting a lot of food on an annual basis. And looking at our population right now, recently we did see the statistics go high to about 8 billion. Now by 2050, it is estimated that the population will probably have grown to 10 billion. Now, if we keep on the same trend, wasting food like this, what's going to happen to us? How are we going to be able to feed all these people? Now, it really starts right from you as an individual, how much food you waste every now and then. I remember here, Felix, there is a time you're talking about how Ugandans are very reckless when it comes to food. When we have it, we waste it.
And that's just the definition of most African people, in particular Ugandans. When you get a chance to rub shoulder with the European world or the extreme to the same, you find that one of the things they keep dearly is food. Someone will cook food for 1 month and get those containers, because that's the life we also used to live. You get a container, put, even you indicate lunch, dinner, breakfast, like then you take to the freezer. You get out one, warm, like they don't throw food. Honestly, you'll go to a white man's rubbish or garbage pit and you will not find food substance. Unless it has to be, or it's off cut or like peelings or what, you don't find. And those people have enough in terms of power to purchase or what, but come to some of us, we are very, and I think that's just the takes the identity of who we choose to be. We are greedy, we are selfish.
Yes.
Like, as I think one time I told you, there's one of the songs and the line that I love so much, a song by Pastor Wilson Bugembe. He said that we are so ungrateful to God, and well, it was in Uganda, like okumanya tetusiima batuwa netufuna n'ebyokusuula, to the point that someone will think of rearing a particular animal because of how much food they throw at home. You get the point?
Yes.
They get that thought, because they know they feed on. Now you can imagine at that point how much we are losing. So I think I'm not even going to waste time to advise. People here don't listen.
But you also
So,
look at
it's up to them.
some of the factors that
give
give
up
them
on us
there.
yet.
You look at the fact that most of these white people in their food preservation, these are people that would keep food for over a month. They are freezing it. But come back here in Uganda, how many people, how many individual Ugandans, I would say, okay, not Muntua and see that kinds, but how many of them can afford to keep food for a month in those deep freezers? Some of them don't even have the freezer, the refrigerators.
I like that point.
So I'm telling
So
you,
why
some of
don't
these
they
things
cook
are
what they can
unable.
eat?
Yes. But you find someone in Africa telling you,
Have you
as
been
they
to
are
functions?
preparing
You don't
food,
give
as
up.
they are preparing food, they even prepare
tr-
excess,
no.
whatever visitor comes
Can you
by.
be cheap?
Yes, they prepare excess.
You get it? And have you been to functions?
Yes.
Like we're at the barrio. Trust me, the group of the guys I was with, none of them ate half of the food they gave them.
The
We
ones
left
that
with like
prepare
a full
excess-
saucepan of food to be thrown. A full
The ones that prepare excess are actually the ones that have the food. But we are talking about someone, do you think there is a Ugandan out there who has a little
So-
food and then they force themselves to
You'll be
prepare
shocked.
more? They
So where do
actually,
you think
the
the
ones that
statistics
prepare a lot
came
of
from?
food have the food. Maybe we should talk about the issue of the guys that have food and are unable to share. Maybe with their neighbors or maybe with anyone else. But I don't think someone who has, for example, 1 kilogram of rice, they will be like, you know what, this is probably not going to be enough. Let me go borrow
Naturally,
another
we are
kilogram at the
wasteful.
shop. Let me go borrow another kilogram so that I can prepare excess. No, these people actually have small food
are
and they're
naturally
preparing
wasteful
it. The
people.
ones that are wasteful have too much, actually. I
Well,
don't see
in
myself
all
being
of this-
wasteful
in all
when I'm
of
trying to
this-
be economical.
In all of this, we need to reduce that 1.3 billion tons that we waste every year, because economically it is translating into about $1 trillion US. That is how much we're looking at on a global basis. So in all that we do, we have to make sure we just cut down that number. Well, it's Good Morning Uganda, and a lot of stories, obviously, that we are talking about and we are yet to talk about. But if you missed out on what was happening, if you are oblivious at whatever was happening to you during the weekend, we're here to just give you some of the highlights locally and internationally.
And we'll begin with UPDF Construction Brigade that has been commended for the good work done in the districts of Isingiro, Mitoma, Kazo, and Kiruhura, where Isingiro, Mitoma, Kazo, and Kiruhura district leaders have applauded Uganda People's Defense Forces Engineering Brigade for quality and timely construction works of health centers and schools, which will help improve service delivery. Uganda People's Defense Forces engineers will next month hand over construction sites of 6 health centers located in Isingiro district, whose works are currently at over 90% completion.
Well, also, preparations for the 37th National Resistance Army Liberation Day celebrations are underway in Kakumiro district, according to the local organizing committee chairperson, RDC of the district, Major David Matovu, also all set to host the day. Now, Liberation Day is celebrated every 26th of January, and it's a day national resistance movement under President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni captured power.
And moving on, the Vice President, Major Jessica Alupo, has asked all parents to take their children to school without discrimination. The Vice President was speaking at a Thanksgiving Mass at the newly consecrated Bishop of Kotido, the Right Reverend Dominic Ibu in Kalak District. She delivered a brand new car to the plaintiff from President Yoweri Museveni to help him in his pastoral duties in the diocese and across the country. Alupo also used the occasion to further encourage religious leaders to guide the faithful on selection of profitable enterprise in the sectors of commercial agriculture, industry, and service delivery.
Now, President Museveni has commended the Covenant Nations Church headed by Pastor Patience Rwabogo for striving to promote unity and reconciliation of society through preaching the gospel of compromise. The President, who was accompanied by the First Lady Janet Museveni, was speaking to participants of the 4-day crusade organized by the Covenant of Nations leaders at Kabalega Senior Secondary School in Masindi District.
Well, across the globe, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has traveled to the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Mr. Johnson visited the outskirts of the city on Sunday before being received by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, this stem from claims the BBC's chairman Richard Sharp helped Mr. Johnson secure a loan guarantee while he was Prime Minister. Mr. Sharp went on to be appointed to his BBC role by the government. Now, during Mr. Johnson's visit to Ukraine, in which he made no mention of the claims, he was received by Mr. Zelensky and other Ukrainian ministers in Kyiv. He also visited the towns of Bucha and Borodyanka to the northwest of Kyiv, which were occupied by Russian forces in March last year. Now, back to California, the gunman who killed 10 people at the Los Angeles area dance club fatally shot himself in a van as officers closed in, according to reports. Authorities found him dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the van he used to flee after people thwarted his attempt at a second shooting. Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert Luna identified the man as a 72-year-old Hulu Kanchan and said no other suspects were at large. Speaking at the evening news conference, he added that the motive remained unclear for the attack, which wounded 10 more. Luna did not have the exact ages of the victims, but said they all appeared to be over 50. 7 of the wounded people remained in the hospital, and the sheriff added that the suspect was carrying what he described as a semi-automatic pistol with an extended magazine, and a second-hand gun was discovered in the van where Chan was found dead.
Now, Tanzania opposition holds a first rally in 6 years. Tanzania's main opposition party has held its first mass rally since the lifting of the 2016 ban, raising hopes of greater political freedom in the East African nation. President Samia Suluhu Hassan this month lifted the ban on Chadema imposed by her hardline predecessor John Magufuli, who was nicknamed Bulldozer for his pugnacious style. Hassan, in power for 22 months, is seeking to break with some of Magufuli's policies and has made an introduction to the opposition. Thank God that the day has come when we speak with fellow Tanzanians through the public gathering, Chadema chairperson Freeman Mbowe told the rally on Saturday, which was attended by thousands in the lakeside city of Mwanza. The rally marked the 30th anniversary of the party's political registration, and the supporters sported the party colors blue, red and white and sang songs praising their leaders as a handful of police officers guarded the venue. Now in climate news, as chemicals designed to kill insects, weeds, fungi and rodents, pesticides are among the most toxic and damaging substances on the planet. The harmful impacts on human and ecosystem health are generally well understood. What receives far less attention, however, is the climate impact of these agrochemicals. Not only do the pesticides directly contribute to the climate crisis, but a changing climate is likely to intensify pressure from agricultural pests and decrease plant resilience, resulting into greater pesticide usage and therefore further greenhouse gas emissions, according to the new report. This vicious cycle of pesticide use fueling climate change and vice versa is examined in a report published on Tuesday by the advocacy group Pesticide Action Network North America. And the assessment is the first in-depth scientific review of the relationship between pesticides and climate change.
Good morning, Uganda. Still with you, giving you the highlights of more of these stories that you can catch up on as you go by your day or as you start off your day. Speaking of starting off the day, clearly Robert has a better way for you to do that aside from watching Good Morning Uganda.
It's all about your health. We want you alive, we want you healthy, we want you productive. And how do you do that? By simply boosting your immune system. You have Hallelujah banana drink juice, Hallelujah tamarind drink, and Hallelujah ginger tea. These boost your immune system. It's only 1,500, any of these three flavors that you choose at any retail shop, any supermarket. Just ask for these products. I guarantee you, you'll have them, and we recommend regular use of these products.
Well, in a couple of minutes, we'll be sharing with you some of the big stories in our papers, but also one thing you need to look out for is the song of the day, the motivation for today. We have to make sure that you're ready mentally, physically, and emotionally to start off this new week. And don't forget, we do have discussions that are yet to be happening in the Good Morning Uganda newsreel, which will be between myself and Felix Nkunda. Later on, we do have the GMU agenda. Don't forget, we also have traffic updates that will be coming in from Mollen and giving you more from weather and climate, and also the weather forecast for today. Good Morning Uganda will return shortly after this. Kiev. He also visited the towns of Bucha and Borodyanka. The political as a handful of flee after ministers in Kiev. He also visited the towns of Bucha and Borodyanka to the northwest of Kiev, which were occupied by Russian forces in March last year. Now, back to California, the gunman who killed 10 people at the Los Angeles area dance club fatally shot himself in a van as officers closed in, according to reports. Authorities found him dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the van he used to flee after people thwarted his attempt at a second shooting. Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert Luna identified the man as a 72-year-old Hulu Kanchan and said no other suspects were at large. Speaking at the evening news conference, he added that the motive remained unclear for the attack, which wounded 10 more. Luna did not have the exact ages of the victims, but said they all appeared to be over 50. 7 of the wounded people remained in the hospital, and the sheriff added that the suspect was carrying what he described as a semi-automatic pistol with an extended magazine, and a second-hand gun was discovered in the van where Chan was found dead.
Now, Tanzania opposition holds a first rally in 6 years. Tanzania's main opposition party has held its first mass rally since the lifting of the 2016 ban, raising hopes of greater political freedom in the East African nation. President Samia Suluhu Hassan this month lifted the ban on Chadema imposed by her hardline predecessor John Magufuli, who was nicknamed Bulldozer for his pugnacious style. Hassan, in power for 22 months, is seeking to break with some of Magufuli's policies and has made an introduction to the opposition. Thank God that the day has come when we speak with fellow Tanzanians through the public gathering, Chadema chairperson Freeman Mbowe told the rally on Saturday, which was attended by thousands in the lakeside city of Mwanza. The rally marked the 30th anniversary of the party's political registration, and the supporters sported the party colors blue, red and white, and sang songs praising their leaders as a handful of police officers guarded the venue. Now in climate news, as chemicals designed to kill insects, weeds, fungi and rodents, pesticides are among the most toxic and damaging substances on the planet. The harmful impacts on human and ecosystem health are generally well understood. What receives far less attention, however, is the climate impact of these agrochemicals. Not only do the pesticides directly contribute to the climate crisis, but a changing climate is likely to intensify pressure from agricultural pests and decrease plant resilience, resulting into greater pesticide usage and therefore further greenhouse gas emissions, according to the new report. This vicious cycle of pesticide
ministers in Kiev. He also visited the towns of Bucha and Borodyanka to the northwest of Kiev, which were occupied by Russian forces in March last year. Now, back to California, the gunman who killed 10 people at the Los Angeles area dance club fatally shot himself in a van as officers closed in, according to reports. Authorities found him dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the van he used to flee after people thwarted his attempt at a second shooting. Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert Luna identified the man as a 72-year-old Hulu Kanchan and said no other suspects were at large. Speaking at the evening news conference, he added that the motive remained unclear for the attack, which wounded 10 more. Luna did not have the exact ages of the victims, but said they all appeared to be over 50. 7 of the wounded people remained in the hospital, and the sheriff added that the suspect was carrying what he described as a semi-automatic pistol with an extended magazine, and a second-hand gun was discovered in the van where Chan was found dead.
Now, Tanzania opposition holds a first rally in 6 years. Tanzania's main opposition party has held its first mass rally since the lifting of the 2016 ban, raising hopes of greater political freedom in the East African nation. President Samia Suluhu Hassan this month lifted the ban on Chadema imposed by her hardline predecessor John Magufuli, who was nicknamed Bulldozer for his pugnacious style. Hassan, in power for 22 months, is seeking to break with some of Magufuli's policies and has made an introduction to the opposition. Thank God that the day has come when we speak with fellow Tanzanians through the public gathering, Chadema chairperson Freeman Mbowe told the rally on Saturday, which was attended by thousands in the lakeside city of Mwanza. The rally marked the 30th anniversary of the party's political registration, and the supporters sported the party colors blue, red and white and sang songs praising their leaders as a handful of police officers guarded the venue. Now in climate news, as chemicals designed to kill insects, weeds, fungi and rodents, pesticides are among the most toxic and damaging substances on the planet. The harmful impacts on human and ecosystem health are generally well understood. What receives far less attention, however, is the climate impact of these agrochemicals. Not only do the pesticides directly contribute to the climate crisis, but a changing climate is likely to intensify pressure from agricultural pests and decrease plant resilience, resulting into greater pesticide usage and therefore further greenhouse gas emissions, according to the new report. This vicious cycle of pesticide
ministers in Kiev. He also visited the towns of Bucha and Borodyanka to the northwest of Kiev, which were occupied by Russian forces in March last year. Now, back to California, the gunman who killed 10 people at the Los Angeles area dance club fatally shot himself in a van as officers closed in, according to reports. Authorities found him dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the van he used to flee after people thwarted his attempt at a second shooting. Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert Luna identified the man as a 72-year-old Hulu Kanchan and said no other suspects were at large. Speaking at the evening news conference, he added that the motive remained unclear for the attack, which wounded 10 more. Luna did not have the exact ages of the victims, but said they all appeared to be over 50. 7 of the wounded people remained in the hospital, and the sheriff added that the suspect was carrying what he described as a
made by Alleluia Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Alleluia from all shops around.
Paying for groceries the old way.
3, 4, yeah, 5.
I don't even know what he's doing.
7, 8, 9.
Allow me.
Paying for groceries with the My Airtel app. You have the power in your pocket. The power to conveniently pay for goods and services. Unlock that power with the My Airtel app. Visit the App Store or Google Play now.
That's my wife. Yeah, let me just take these coins.
Happiness comes to us in many places. It's in knowing the mosquito net keeps our children healthy. The wife having the support of her husband. It's in deciding together when to have a baby. And for some, focusing on what's important right now. So what's your happiness? Make the right health decisions to ensure happiness for you and your family.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
The newsreel is in right here on Good Morning Uganda. You're watching UBC TV, where we live to inspire. It's a new, fresh week, a Monday at that, 23rd of January 2023. My name is Philomena, Mastiko, and of course on set with me is Felix Nkunda. And we're about to tackle today's issue or today's discussion, and that is in regards to school fees increment, and also looking at our children who are in any minute right now, they'll be getting back to school. Of course, we are getting to the end of January, and schools now must be ready to receive the children. Parents are also in their final arrangement or processes to make sure these children go back to school. Now, as we get into that discussion, obviously one thing that comes off head is school fees. A child obviously will not get back to school without school fees, or at least without a plan on how those fees will be collected by the parent and submitted to the school. But this becomes a point of discussion. Why? Mainly because government did pass out a directive, especially to the private schools, asking them not to increase their school fees at any one point. It did actually put a cap. Now, over the weeks, from the time this directive was passed, we saw very many private schools go on to increase their school fees, and clearly parents haven't been quiet about that. They've been very vocal about this, and we don't know what's going to happen, because if government has passed a directive and private schools are doing the opposite, then what does that mean? But there is a reason that has been fronted by the private schools. They say because most of the government schools are subsidized by the government, usually maybe through tax waivers, or maybe the salaries and all of that. But this is not the same case with private schools because they do have to fend for themselves. In fact, their chairperson said if this continues to go through, if this directive is implemented, most of these private schools are going to be kicked out of business. So there is that. There are too many worries. But also as a parent, you'll be very happy because over the years, private schools have been found of, I guess, increasing school fees to an unacceptable amount, if I should put it that way. And this has made very many parents uncomfortable, and also looking at the economic times right now, they're very hard and we have to adjust accordingly. But how do you adjust when you are looking at expenses like this? Education is a right of every child here in Uganda, but also the quality of education matters. Now, all of that we're going to be discussing what happens if this directive goes through and what is government's plan on making sure they respond to the schools that haven't obeyed this directive. But starting off on all these discussions, I would really love to know from you, Felix, do you think this directive actually does us some good as a parent, but also looking at the private school owners? Yeah.
Well, you also did mention in your introduction that education is a right.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the most important foundation for our discussion, and later on also to inform government, and better still to also inform the private sector, which are most probably affected by some of these directives that government does give. The reason why education was made, if you try to look into the mind of the legislators then, who put education under Chapter 4 of the Constitution and initially agreed to make it a right.
Yes.
What was in their minds was that in fact, it is not universal, in as much as it springs from a Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN, later on, of course, the International Charter on Socio-Economic, and then, of course, later on, the Charter on Child Rights by the UN as well. But it is not an international appreciation that in every country it cuts across. But for countries like Uganda, which falls under the third world, it is not wrong for them to think right that emphasis should be put on how do you keep or grow a civilized state. Now, civility in the form of awareness and exposure, and exposure in the direction of education. Between you and me, you can imagine the effect, if you want to assess the effect of education on national growth. It will give you a trajectory of why this should be a right. Why should government have dire interest in making sure all students are able to learn?
Yes.
Between 1987, 1986, rather when the NRM, we can look at just that time, or before it, the number of children in schools vis-a-vis after, I think, around 1993 when UPE came,
yes,
around 1993. And thereafter, have you seen a change in the civility levels? For more. Because Uganda is struggling with formulating bigger, what we call this, formal sector. How many people can you put into the most important aspects that help you realize your vision? For example, if you're talking about the National Development Plan, talking about the Vision 2040, the Vision 2025, who are going to activate all these things? That's the purpose of education in third world countries, because they are still struggling with moving from the third world nature of business, where you have a lot of informal people who are in charge of activities.
Yes.
Yet you are trying to introduce things like industrialization, but who are going to man some of these new ventures? So you look at that. You're looking at a population that can solve its problems. You're trying to put together a population that can solve its problems. That's why I'm trying to justify why it's actually right, why they look at some dealing with that, because you need doctors, you need engineers. Because it is still a big deal in these countries, third world countries, to construct roads, to have doctors, lawyers, teachers, economists, just to mention but a few. It's still a big deal, because all these activities fit directly into the emancipation of a country in terms of socio-economic welfare. Now, that's why you need to focus on these lots, because it is these, the people, that will help turn this into the reality. However, there are two things you have to examine, Philomena, as you do talk about education. Even as you do form sense out of the directive of government, but there are two things you must focus on that either back up the essence of such directions to make sense out of them.
Yes.
One, how does government in its own sense define education? Because when you say you're going to force the Philomenas to teach your children because of maybe you, that's what you want. But who is teaching? What are they learning? Sometimes is it about enforcing a right or making sense out of a right? And those are two different things, and the ones that we struggle most when it comes to academics in Uganda. No wonder most recently you've had some people make statements that even graduates are as good as illiterates.
Illiterates, yes.
Now that comes from answering those two questions. Are we enforcing a process, or are we making the best out of a process? For example, when you say that you want to pass a directive that all people should just go, like I've not had a time, and such directives should come alongside other directives. Like one, how do we emphasize quality education vis-a-vis quantity? Because when you pass such directives, I think the motive is about quantity.
Yes, not quality.
Not quality. Now, a country like Uganda that seeks to grow into another phase of economic transition, what do they need, quantity or quality?
Of course they need quality.
That will be the question. So, we have had these long holidays, but do we even have the government coming out to make continuous assessment about who is teaching these children, what they are learning? We have heard there was a new curriculum some time ago. They tried to.
They did, yes.
And I think that both most
before they actually got into the change of the O-level curriculum, there was another change.
And they have actually also asked universities to try and incorporate this new curriculum into their studies and what. But you see, there is one thing that we need to also appreciate on top of all this. One, ability. You see, education being a right is not an automatic appreciation. People can go to school, but it's not a sure deal that they will actually learn. You see, we look at education in isolation of the circumstantial challenges. And we have seen this on a daily. I'll give you an example. When you go to government schools and you send kids there, they've been having a big discussion about feeding. At some point, kids were supposed to pack food to school. At the other point, they would say parents must be in Tanda. There was even that time it became famous in Tanda. Now, there's a particular study that was made that there's a big relationship between feeding and education. And just take it upon yourself. Like, you're sending kids, you're giving all these directives, but we are not focusing on the things that will aid useful education. Is it enough for us to say kids must go back to school? But what are they going to eat?
Under what circumstances? The
teachers are already striking.
Yes.
We are challenging. Time and again we have talked about what is taught to our children in terms of what fits into the vision of a country. I think we need to widen the discussion away from just talking about directives to send kids back to school. And for us, that does not serve the purpose of the kind of education we want as a country. Because even if you send Philomena the kids back to school, we are just going to be, there's this saying of people who did arts that he had new wine in an old bottle or something like that. You're just going to be running around the same roundabout.
So there are certain issues that government needs to look into before.
Even if we had 1,000 students studying every year, but what is the quality? It's not useful to have the whole country in schools, but they're not learning. And that can be tested by any one of you. You can go to any of the universities today in Kampala, and at the point of university, someone has studied for probably 7 years, you add 6 years, and maybe the 3 years. That's about 16 years in school, and they cannot speak a language they have been examined for or with for 16 years. Go to university, someone is speaking English in Acholi, English in Dunyankole, English in Uganda, za, zi, zu. Now, that is the kind of education you're passing on. Because someone has been studying that language for 16 years, not counting nursery years.
Yes.
You get the point. Now, what are we pushing for? Shouldn't we also think on how do we put right the system? I don't know if you've taken time to interact with the people who studied in the 60s, the 50s,
It's a bit
the 70s.
Yes.
Have you heard the English they speak?
Even the way
And they
there
didn't
is
have
an
the
arts and
facilities.
things,
Yes. You meet a doctor who's about 60, 70 years old, and meet a chap who is about a year 31, 33, 20, what? There's a big difference, and that tells the kind of education they got versus this speedy process, yitam, like to get done. Because today it is a matter of fact that, you see, and you're not against such directives, but when you give such directives, you bring us back to the other point that we are just getting through a system.
Yes.
I would want to hear an evaluation. For example, syllabi must be, when do we evaluate?
How effective it is before we create changes.
The content.
Yes.
When you say we are going to introduce a new curriculum, it's, for example, who evaluates the P1? Is there a team, a committee that say, this content that's been studied for the last 25 years, from P1 to P4? Because you have had, there's a time we've had COVID for over 1 year per not studying. Why don't we use this time to evaluate? It is not enough to talk about directives to have all schools don't reduce school fees. And the reason why I brought it may look like it, but I brought this up because it works all together. Now, if you may also let me, Philo, having talked about the other circumstantial challenges that education faces, we can talk about the facilitation.
Yes.
That has brought the biggest controversies between private schools and government.
And yes, which actually is the main issue of concern right now.
Definitely.
Yes.
Now, here's the thing. When education was made a right in a country like Uganda, it meant that the biggest bearer of the obligation to enforce the right is government. Okay? Now, it means government must put in place every possible means and measures to have all children of Uganda attend school. And if they are attending school, they should enjoy the beauty of education that comes with, 1, a proper academic environment, 2, a proper environment for them to learn, 3, proper facilitators, and the facilitators must also be in an environment that endeavors them to pass on knowledge. Now, all these different duties that should be done around enforcing or realization of the right to health or right to education cannot entirely be fulfilled by government. And by the way, it is an international challenge, not only Uganda. Else, even when you go to the Americas, people talk of
people shun public schools quite a lot. Yes.
Unless most recent, I had a report from our brothers here in Rwanda who said, I don't know how to report to us, but they said that because of the quality of government schools, people now are shunning private schools.
But let's say that report is true, Felix, though. How many countries can actually come out and say that for their own education system, making comparisons between the public? This is just one of the countries we have had
quite a few, yeah.
Yes.
And you see, governments are not capacitated because the populations are huge, that's a matter of fact, and also the facilitation is quite high. However, it is only sensible for a government to empower other actors to assist in executing this obligation.
Yes.
It is only sensible. How is this done? When you get private institutions who are willing to come and step in for you, what do? You don't get them by the neck in terms of taxes, in terms of all these, you know, bills and what. I can tell you an average school pays about 10 million shillings for electricity a week. An average school will spend 10 million shillings weekly on electricity. If they're using national water, they'll spend not less than 5 million a week. And we're not talking about food, we're not talking about salaries, we're not talking about cleaning,
the infrastructure development as well. Yes.
So, on average, if a middle class school, if that's a good definition, will spend probably about 25 to 30 million a week. 25 to 30 million. Now, that's what I'm talking about. The schools that spend about 100 million, given the numbers and the locations. Now, we're not talking about the taxes that they have to pay. Come to the salaries, the remittances they make to the NSSF, and the additions, blab, and all that. Now, people have talked about these institutions being expensive, but it's the only option they are left with. But should we also get into the discussion, what support is government giving to these institutions that are helping it realize a duty it is supposed to enforce individually, by the way?
Yes.
Because in the Constitution, they don't talk about that this duty will be executed with help of these people just coming in as investors, you know, business what, but they end up helping. So what is the part that should be played by government in assisting private institutions? When you just come and say it is a directive to reduce tuition, but the water bills are going up every day. But I don't know how much you pay for your car, Philomena, the unit.
Yes.
Everything is going up. Chalk is expensive.
That's true.
Food, my God. Have you bought food lately?
But Felix, even before we get into all this, I do understand where they're coming from with their complaints. But even before, okay, I can't say the economy was really doing well before we saw the massive, you know, increment in prices of everything. But also, schools have been increasing fees over time, especially when it comes to the private schools. It makes a lot of sense, but can we actually say that some of these schools don't take advantage of the fact that they're not really regulated in terms of the monies and the fees they charge parents? Don't they take advantage of this?
Truth be told, the private institutions have not been well regulated.
Yes.
That's a matter of fact. But the failure of the regulation will shock you.
Because I feel like this is a loophole on its own.
It's a loophole,
Yes.
but it's intended to be there. By who? By government. Either directly or indirectly.
Yes.
And I'll tell you 3 or 4 reasons. 1, privatization of business in Uganda limits the involvement of government. Why? Because it is the only way it can earn. Government earns when private institutions are unlimited in whatever they do. The wider you throw your net, the wider the government throws its taxation net. So it is a good thing for them. 2, because of the continued failure of government to deal with the most biting issues of private institutions, it ceases to have a say in how they will run. You get the point. The one person will ask you directly, what has government done for the growth of private academic institutions? Away from saying that they are the ones who offer the center numbers and register
because
companies.
it's their mandate under the Ministry of Education.
And that's not a contribution.
Yeah.
Do we have a pool? Like most of the schools out of COVID, they were seeking to government, telling them, guys, we are closing. Bail us out. Give us some kafan. We shall pay. Now schools are open. Kids are back. What happened? We said, okay, if the money you can't give, reduce the prices of water for schools. Remove the taxes on this. Uniforms, food, as long as it's purchased for the school. What did government do? But now you're coming out to say, guys, you can't increase. But I've told you, even if you say previously it was the norm.
Yes.
But between you and me, you know that it has been consistent in this country for the last 10 years that prices of everything have been hiking.
Yes.
It could have been at a lower rate. Most recently, you have seen a total rapid. But previously, everything has been going up. One, when you have workers, the money you used to pay them 10 years ago can't be the amount of government workers are all over.
We even saw teachers threatening to
They
strike
asked teachers
again.
already.
Teachers,
why
yes,
are they striking? But these are government.
Yeah, these are
How about the ones in now? The one now, what happens in private schools? For them, they don't wait because they know where. It's not about them. It's just a trickle down effect. The teachers want more salary. They put it on school fees. And you know how that comes up? Because the teachers are living under biting economic times. They'll also go back to the employer. We don't have a, and it is a chain challenge. Landlord increases rent because he also has, his kids have been asked a lot of
money.
Now, the teachers are the ones who are renting the houses.
Everyone is inconveniencing.
They are just passing on the burden.
Yes.
That's the world we live in. Now, once you pass the burden to the head teacher or the directors, they also pass the burden to the parents. Now, what do the parents do? They also probably go and pass on the burden to wherever
the employer.
If they are in the market, they'll also go and increase what you've been buying. Now, that means that government must step in on a general spectrum to deal with some of the challenges. Because imagine if some of these schools can purchase some of the operational items they use at a lower cost. As I've told you, things like water. If institutions of learning are assisting you with executing a right to education, why are they buying water?
Well, the discussion this morning
between
myself and Felix, we're looking at the status of education in Uganda. And of course, this is in light of the directive that was passed by government, especially to private schools. And we also love to hear from you. Do you agree to government regulating fees for all schools? Do you agree to government regulating fees for all schools? Now, this is both in the public and private sector. But just to give you a few of the highlights in this directive that was passed by government to these schools. Now, the school fees actually regulation policy is still being considered, and here is the thing. It sets the minimum and maximum school fees and requirements all schools should follow. Now, failure to adhere to set standards actually attracts a fine between 1 million Uganda shillings and 20 million Uganda shillings, or a 1-year imprisonment. And according to the policy, schools are slated to charge at least 260,000 or at most 1.6 million. This is the maximum cap we are looking at, depending on the nature of the schools, location, staff salaries, the cost of administration, among very many others. The policy also prohibits schools from charging students requirements that are not set by the School Charges and Fees Regulations Committee. And also, owners of schools who defy this definitely will be subjected to a fine of the money I talked about, that is 20 million Uganda shillings. Now, looking at all of these things and looking at the kind of education that we are having, both in private and public schools, because it's not a matter or a point of secrecy. We know that if anything, if everybody had the economic or the financial capacity, Felix, they would have their children go to private schools. Now, what does this say about the trust? Can we trust the government enough? If, let's say, if they went through with this directive and it is what it is, can we trust the government enough to be able to appropriate for the education in the private schools? Looking at the situation that we're already having in the public schools, very many complaints. Is our trust given, is it, how do I, are we allowed to trust the government to make sure that we'll get this education in the private schools?
You're making it seem like we have an option.
Well,
our government.
Let's just say, I mean,
so
maybe the private schools could come up and front their reasons, and maybe government could listen to them. But I'm just saying, if that doesn't happen, can we trust them enough to know that we'll get high quality education in both public and private school, that a parent will be okay to either take their children to a public school or a private school, because they know at the end of the day, the education is going to be high quality?
You see, here's the thing, Philo. A directive, and I think with due respect, this is misplaced. I'll tell you the difference between a directive and an order and what should have been done. Now, you direct someone you have total control over.
Yes.
total control. But the question is, does the government have total control over private institutions? When you say you're going to fine them a particular amount of money, basing on what? Which law? What law have they broken? Does a directive become a law? Is it a standing order? It's a resolution of parliament? Like, how do you enforce that? They're just attracting cases for themselves, whoever will be fined or whatever. And that can't be a reason for revoking someone's license as well. I think this whole mode and methodology and approach of threatening is not working. Truth be told, education is in need, like there is need for children to be in schools. But even if, let's imagine they are going to abide by this, do you know what will happen? Learners won't learn. Because the schools be like, okay, you're putting that, but for us what we shall do here, kids will come, poor teachers will come, lousy teachers, angry teachers. Everyone is angry in terms of hunger, in terms of mood. They are hungry and angry. Now, what are the results? Who's losing? Don't you think we should have some sort of a win-win situation? Shouldn't we be having a discussion with these private schools and finding out how we can help them execute this right called education, than trying to box them in? If you don't, what do you mean if they don't? Someone got a loan, bought land, built structures, spent about 6 to 2 years struggling to get students to come in that school.
Yes.
They are, all the time they are paying salary, they are paying loans, some of them have sold everything, like nothing. Actually, 90% of the schools in Uganda are running on loan schemes.
Yes.
And this is the evidence as to why. But why would they be running if there's a full government that is supposed to appreciate a right that can assist them? And what, as I've told you, on average, a school can spend 30 to 50 million a week on operational costs, food. In fact, when you go to some of the village schools, for them, they don't have arguments with you. They just send for the kids to come with the food they'll eat.
Yes.
In raw form, because they know these are places where they dig. Go to the Kisoros, the Kiriandongos, all those village schools. When you're starting the term, Philomena, Mastiko, what bayomba now?
Because they know
if you remember
the
in schools, hey, we used to bring the brooms, the toilet papers,
yes.
and these help reduce the operation costs of the school. First, when we went to school, I remember in Lubiri here, we used to pay about, we were paying 90,000 a term, about 120 at most. And that's a super first class school. But how was it being able to? It's an affiliation to, I think, the Protestant Church, the Church of Uganda. You go to others, like the reason why they used to send these things, not because some of them, of course, used to sell them. Some schools.
Well, even now, we know that there are some schools that do it an official
but it is for them to close that gap. When a child brings a broom, you know that a school is swept like 10 times a day. You know that. Toilet paper. I think,
because if you're asking for all these requirements, I also want that to be shown on the school fees, because my imagination or my thought process here takes
this
me
is
to
helping you
years.
cut the costs.
Yes, so it should
operation.
be realized on the money you're asking for in terms of fees or the requirements, whichever.
If schools had a way to send us parents and of course the kids water and electricity, they would be taking that as well. Because these are some of the, and I do work with a couple of schools in terms of assisting in management and the board. But these are, when you look at the expenses, woo, you wonder where, if electricity is big. In fact, most of the schools are getting, now if you notice, most of them no longer use national water. They dug those wells in and they have pumps and all these things. Electricity, they're trying to go solar, because it's so hefty a bill. You end up, if if a term has 3 months, is it?
Yeah, usually
And
3
every
months.
week you're spending 50 million. How much money do you spend in a term? On just costs, bills. No salary, no feeding, but just you're looking at operational costs. These your children and our children vandalize things on every day.
Oh, yes, they do.
Hey?
Absolutely.
They will break glasses. Actually, man, now, these are things that people don't want to look at. And when you look at business, school businesses, people think it's very profitable. Yes, there's some profit. That because people are in it for the profit.
But it's not as big as
we
the
imagine,
expectations
and
from the
how
public.
government also
Yes.
imagines. Matter of fact, let me tell you, if you overpush these private schools and they close, we shall have 70% of our students not able to go to school because government in its capacity cannot afford to consume all our children. The only thing we can do apart from the directive is to find ways on how we can work with private institutions. One, let us sit down and form a dialogue and understand what needs to be done to assist bring the prices down. You get it?
Yes.
But this thing of saying directives, and of course there are some schools that have an abnormal, you know, of course charges. But there's a case, one of the local class cases that was Makerere versus, I think the lady was called Sharon versus Makerere University. In the ruling of court was quite clear that one has the liberty to appreciate education wherever they can, where it facilitates them much, much better in their own capacity in terms of religion, economy, economics, and many, many others. One would tell you, if your kids can't afford, take them where they can afford. There are many alternatives. For us, when we go to schools and they tell us it's supposed to pay 4 million and I can afford 2, I go and look for the 2. That's the sad reality of life. Okay? So parents also cut your clothes. You know? Fit in your own hole.
Well, clearly, as he has stated, don't just live within your minutes. Even
I think that's important.
Yeah,
it's
even
important.
when it comes to education. Well, let us know what you think about this directive. Do you agree to government regulating school fees in all schools? Get onto our socials and give us your feedback. I'll be sharing that in a couple of minutes. But for now, looking at the big stories in our papers, a new vision inside the Entebbe airport scandal. About 60 staff dismissed over misconduct in 2 years. General Mhozi thrills a Sebei region, and also powerline vandalism. Government to ban scrap dealers. Maybe this could be the answer. I don't know.
Because of what?
Sironko Kal, that is the chief administrative officer, pays 200 cows for bride. All right. And Museveni hails government nations charge for preaching peace. And over 450 landlords are paid 75 billion Uganda shillings in cases of land eviction. Get yourself the New Vision and see those details. But also we do have the Daily Monitor. Felix, what are we looking at?
We're seeing a school's milk policy hangs in a balance there, and governance gaps leave NSSF cash at mercy of vultures. Now, a good diet can improve male fertility rather. I don't know how true that is, but anyway. Man uses 36 million bribe to fly from Entebbe to Brazil.
Okay. Daily Nation, divorce crisis. Couples are going online and hiring private detectives to spy on each other. Ruto awarding Gazrailo digs in over 2022 poll. Was KCSE exam stolen? Questions over high grades, and looking at fears over price hikes, shortages of basic goods, and church where mentally ill are jailed for prayer. Looking at the Citizen, Bank of Tanzania governor eager for ESC Bank verdicts, and Vice President spots barriers to justice delivery. Coal shipments on the rise at Mtwara Port, and the EABC projects $15 billion in intra-East African community commerce in 2023. Well, that's it from the papers. Get yourselves copies of all these and catch up on what's happening with the East African region. We're going for a break. When we get back, Mollen will be in the house to give you more from weather and climate and also give us the forecast for today. Will it rain? Will it shine? She has the answers to all those questions. Good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Paying for groceries the old way.
3, 4, yeah. 5.
I don't even know what he's doing.
7, 8, 9.
Allow me.
Paying for groceries with the My Airtel app. You have the power in your pocket. The power to conveniently pay for goods and services. Unlock that power with the My Airtel app. Visit the App Store or Google Play now.
That's my wife. Yeah, let me just take these coins. Yeah.
When you talk about our motherland Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, you cannot fail to smile because of the smile that fills the faces of the citizens. Our nice good weather and nature that sustains us all, that enables us all to continue each in their own way because we are all different even according to each individual's work. But what joins us to become one person is the sweetness from the flavored drink Alleluia Jingati drink and Alleluia Tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Alleluia Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Alleluia from all shops around.
Happiness comes to us in many places. It's in knowing the mosquito net keeps our children healthy. The wife having the support of her husband. It's in deciding together when to have a baby. And for some, focusing on what's important right now. So what's your happiness? Make the right health decisions to ensure happiness for you and your family.
Get the most affordable 4G smartphone in Uganda from Airtel. Now heavily discounted from 250,000 shillings to 150,000 shillings only. Yes! 150,000 shillings only to keep you connected to your loved ones.
Dial *175*94# to activate free 1 GB instantly and 100% double data on all weekly and monthly bundles for 3 months. Get one today while stock lasts from the nearest Airtel shop. With Airtel, the smartphone network.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Well, it is Good Morning Uganda, and of course we are now going to be taking you through the traffic updates. Later on we'll be getting into the weather updates, but I want to concentrate mostly on the Kampala-Jinja highway, where we're looking at some traffic that is starting to build up across several places. Now, if you're headed into town and you're going to be using the Kampala-Jinja highway, you might need to look out for some of the spots that are dominated with traffic this morning, especially the Jinja Road right there. There's a little bit of traffic as you head into town, but then again, for people leaving town, it looks like it's mostly in green lines. So meaning that you might have less traffic as you're moving out of town. But then again, as you head into central town, right across City Square, right there, we're looking at very clear traffic. That is, if you're heading ahead towards Kampala Road, there's a little bit of traffic just over there as you turn from Kampala Road towards Bombo Road. But then that does clear in just a small distance. You have the upper lanes as well. You're looking at Benjiwanuka. That is for those heading into town. That seems to be having a little bit of traffic as you head into town. But then again, also down on Kampala Road, both for those leaving town and those coming into town, you're looking at quite some clear traffic for you right there. But going ahead, if you're now towards that end of Bombo Road, you look at traffic building up just as you cross over from Kampala Road into Bombo Road. That is where we have more traffic building up across that area. But then again, much of it is also just building up. That is for people coming into town. So if you're using Bombo Road right from Wandega into town, you might encounter a little bit of traffic as you're heading into town. Away from that, we also want to take a look at the weather update for this morning. We'll be tapping in from our satellite that is over Uganda. We'll be getting into what is happening across the country, and we can see mostly dry weather for the northern part of the country, and that includes also parts of the Karamoja region. We're starting off with quite a sunny morning for you. That extends up to eastern Uganda. We're looking at mostly darker skies, so meaning that that is quite clear where you're seeing the open dark colors. That is indicating sunny conditions. Now we'll look at that system that is building across from the Lake Victoria Basin towards parts of central as well as midwestern Uganda. That is where we are expecting rainy conditions. Now take a look at that system right there. It is heading westwards, meaning that it will be bringing us rains across several places. We already have a few drops of rains across areas of Fort Portal, extending all the way up to the Rwenzori region. That is indicated in the green and orange colors right there. We do expect that that will also be propagating mostly across parts of central. You look at Mubende, Luwero right there, starting off with mostly cloudy weather. And that is the same weather for Kampala as well. We're looking at more of those clouds continuing to develop across the central area. And of course, that will also be bringing us rains for this morning. But we'll go ahead and take a look at the forecast that is coming in from the Uganda National Meteorological Authority. Also want to take a look at what is happening in terms of temperatures. But we have seen continuously dry weather across northern Uganda as well as the eastern part of the country. And we could be persisting with similar conditions, considering that this is still a dry season, and most of those areas still the season indicates that we might continue with those dry conditions. However, also for the southern part of the country, we are seeing a pickup of wet weather activities, and that will be for a couple of days, and mostly that is because of the low pressure systems that have now started to fill up across the Indian Ocean. So that is an effect that does come in to bring in a few of the rains across the area, but also looking at more of those, especially for the Lake Victoria Basin, where we constantly see it enhance wet weather activities across the area, especially for the Lake Victoria Basin as well as parts of the southern sector. Also, you consider that with western Uganda, you now look at most of the effects coming in from the Congo forest, bringing in a few moisture and rains across the area. So that is the rainmaker over that over the western part of the country, a little bit also towards northwestern Uganda, but also for this time of the year. it is normal that we have reduced wet weather activities. Now, in terms of temperatures, we look at mostly northern Uganda having continued with mostly intervals of sunny and cloudy conditions. So that actually keeps the temperatures a little bit warm. Also for the continuous dry conditions as well. That means that we might have more daytime highs going up, especially for most of those areas. Now, also, if you look at some of the climate news coming in, we're looking at mostly the forum that is ongoing, that is the World Economic Forum, and this year's focus is mostly on that is on the climate crisis. Now, we've seen a couple of protests also across the area, and these are people standing by saying, look, you can hold all these forums, but our main concern is that the world has not been doing enough action when it comes to climate action, and they are demanding for a climate emergency. Of course, this was at the Davos 2023, where CEOs face challenges over the sluggish climate efforts. And this is why we see some of the activists like Greta Thunberg, who recently was also in Germany protesting over coal production expansion. And they are saying that enough is enough. They want Congress. They're looking at most of the CEOs that are actually behind all these major improvements, especially in production or in the energy sector, to put their efforts towards making sure that we can reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. Now, a return to Davos by corporate titans and the bankers, that is after the recent temperature increase report, could actually mean that it is time that they put a spotlight onto what seems to be the world's biggest challenge right now. We also did see the UN Secretary General, that is Antonio Guterres, coming up to say that he also supports the move for climate emergency. He says that world leaders should be focused mostly on what we can do to reduce greenhouse gases, and also most of these CEOs should be looking at projects that will cut emissions of greenhouse gases instead of expanding what seems to be the cause of these greenhouse gases. Now, speaking at this forum, the UN Secretary General did talk about the fact that humanity has ignored one of the biggest challenges, and in his words, he says it is something that we need to look into, and he also talks about a climate emergency. And of course, these are some of the issues that you still see the world is trying to struggle with, but the UN has been also at the forefront of that, making sure that people are looking into a way forward. How do we cut emissions of greenhouse gases? And in the face of potentially devastating consequences, of course, of climate change, now we look at what can be done. He did also talk about self-defeating war on nature. He says humanity has chosen to have a war on nature, but in turn, we're the ones that are defeating ourselves. So this is where we do expect that most of the CEOs will have a turnaround and look closely into their investments. We do know that now the world is phasing out the use of coal. So that means that if you're going to invest in the energy sector, you better be looking at renewable energy or clean energy. And that is why some of these forums are actually important in terms of addressing the climate crisis. But then again, we also want to take a look at what is happening across the country right now. We'll be getting into what is being given out from the Uganda National Meteorological Authority, and also to know how much has been forecasted in terms of temperatures for this morning, but also the weather that we're likely to have for the rest of today. We're looking at the eastern side of Central, where we have Ruero, Wobblen, Bururi, and Nakaseke. We're forecasting intervals of sunny and cloudy conditions. Quite a warm morning for you, that is at 27 degrees. And across the eastern part of Black Victoria, Tororo, Busia, Iganga, and Jinja, we are forecasting that is isolated showers. Also quite a warm morning at 27 degrees Celsius. And eastern Uganda, starting off with mostly a sunny morning, we'll be having intervals of cloudy conditions as the morning progresses, but it is still hot. Look at that 29 for this morning. That is going to feel even hotter in the afternoon, because we do expect to continue with mostly sunny weather across eastern Uganda. Now, Mount Elgon Highlands, that is where we have Mbale, Bududa, Buko, and Sironko. We are forecasting light showers. Those will be across just a few areas, starting off with a pleasant morning at 26 degrees centigrade. Southwestern Uganda, where we have Barara, Ibanda, Bushenyi, and Jubilizi. We are forecasting intervals of sunny and cloudy conditions as well. That will be starting off at 26 degrees centigrade. And also we do expect to have more rains developing over there. That is later in the afternoon. The western parts of Lake Victoria, we're forecasting rains that will be across parts of Masaka, Kalisizo, Zimbabwe, and Rakai. Those will be coming in as the day progresses. We're looking at a 26 degrees centigrade, quite some pleasant weather for you this morning. Now, the central parts of the Lake Victoria Basin, where we have Mukono, Kampala, Entebbe, and Wakiso, we're looking at quite a chilly morning at 25 degrees. We also have those rains in the forecast that will be across several places, and that system is also likely to cross over into the afternoon, where we'll be having mostly rainy conditions over several places. We're looking at still hot weather being forecast for eastern Uganda as well as the northern parts of the country, but also if you look at the northern sector, we're looking at central area where we have Gulu, Kitgum, Padel, and Jumani. We're forecasting at 34 this morning, quite hot, and it will be even hotter in the afternoon because we do expect a continuation of sunny weather over that area. And that also extends to areas of Karamoja, where we still see mostly sunny weather. That means temperatures will also be in the lower 30s. Also to the West Nile, we could be looking at the lower 30s as well, even for this morning, and it will get much hotter likely in the afternoon. So if you're headed there, if you're anywhere around that area, you might want to also be aware of these temperatures and probably keep that water bottle with you. That is it in terms of our weather updates for now. We do have a Good Morning Uganda agenda that will be coming up. Later than that, we'll also be taking you through sports updates, after which we'll be going into Good Morning Uganda Extra. My name is Mollen, Kenyena, wishing you a wonderful Monday.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by
Gatawo with MTN Momo Advance. Momo Advance tops up your Momo to complete your transactions. Dial star 165 star 5 star 3 hash to apply. MTN Momo Advance is always available when you need it.
Happiness comes to us in many places. It's in knowing the mosquito net keeps our children healthy. The wife having the support of her husband. It's in deciding together when to have a baby. And for some, focusing on what's important right now. So what's your happiness? Make the right health decisions to ensure happiness for you and your family.
When you talk about our motherland Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, you cannot fail to smile because of the smile that fills the faces of the citizens. Our nice good weather and nature that sustains us all, that enables us all to continue each in their own way because we are all different even according to each individual's work. But what joins us to become one person is the sweetness from the flavored drink Alleluia Jingati drink and Alleluia Tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Alleluia Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Alleluia from all shops around.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
Good morning, Uganda. Agenda starts right now on UBC TV. It's the 23rd of January 2023. Well, if you woke up with us, we're glad that you managed to travel this entire journey till now. And if you have just